Figuring out the best player available, the best player, the best fit, all of that could be, well, it could get the best of you. We'll talk about how we get over all that today here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. You can find us wherever you get your podcast, whether you watch or listen. Please make sure you tap in each and every day so you do not miss an episode and you can become one of our everydayers. Today's show and episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Make sure you tap into FanDuel for all your March Madness needs. Here we're going to discuss this today. What will determine it? What will determine what? Identifying the best player and the best fit. And is that the same guy? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. What will determine that? Is it the same guy? And we're going to start at the very top by identifying the best player and the best fit. So I do often do a little bit of fishing. I do throw my figurative rod out on social media to see what can catch. It's not about gotcha, but it is about trying to find out the pulse of the fan base and the people that really want to know about prospects. I had someone yesterday say, "Wait, can you do a whole pod on Mason Graham the way you did?" Or no, they asked me, "Can I do a pod on Ashton Genty?" And somebody else asked me to do a pod on Mason Graham the way I did Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. And I told them maybe. So what I'm going to do in this show is include Mason Graham and Ashton Genty into our thinking. They are on my conscience when I discuss identifying the best player and the best fit. First of all, we have to understand and identify what that is. So best player, is that the guy that when he becomes available to you at number 5, are you going to sit and say, who's going to have the best career? Or is it the guy that you say, who's going to be best for us? And what intangibly rich characteristics do they have that's going to best lift our franchise and our football team? Or a little bit of both. Is it about positional value? Is it about first-year impact, since he's the first draft pick for 3 guys who are doing this for the first time in their capacity, and head coach Liam Cohen, GM James Gladstone, and EVP Tony Boselli? Is it we got to get off to a good start and we got to hit a home run? Is it this guy's going to be the person that defines our tenure here? Is it all of that stuff, or is it something else? History says that you take the best player you can that you hope has a Hall of Fame career, and that in and of itself lifts the franchise because you got the guy that's the most productive player. Sometimes that does not mean winning on draft night. I'll say it again. I think sometimes we get confused by the draft process, thinking that we have to win on draft night and do the things that make fans happy, when that's not the case. You have to win more games. And I'll make a point about Trayvon Walker here in a second, the same point that I made 3 or 4 years ago. And that is that when everybody said, we're going to see how this measures out between him and Hutch, I said after year 1, nobody's going to care if the Jaguars' record is better than Detroit's. You had a team picking number 1 and a team picking number 2. At the end of that year, the Jaguars were in the second round of the playoffs. Detroit didn't sniff it. They were home. You didn't hear much about the fact that Aiden Hutchinson had way more sacks than Trayvon, because Trayvon's contribution to a winner mattered more. The next year, when Trayvon did get 10 sacks and the Jaguars were struggling, but the Lions were advancing to the NFC Championship game, you heard a lot about people talking about the differences between those two players. And then even last year, when Trayvon got another 10 sacks, you still heard it, even though Hutchinson missed most of the season. And he was a candidate at the time when he got hurt for Defensive Player of the Year. It's carried over to this offseason where you still hear people trying to pretend that they're trading for Trayvon Walker for a bag of peanuts, this lid on this cup, and my glasses holder. And I keep telling people this has taken on a life of its own where folks who don't really know ball are sitting here and devaluing a player that does a whole bunch of stuff, including get sacks, but he does a whole bunch of other stuff that people don't pay attention to. So it means that a lot of times folks pay attention to things that they want to pay attention to and ignore things and act like things don't exist that really football teams actually covet and are in high demand of, like a guy like Trayvon Walker. So it's important that we don't win the draft night. It's important that this team gets a player that is able to make his contribution so important to the Jaguars that it lifts the franchise. Because the more games you win, if that player is making a contribution, no one will ever consider him a bust. Y'all know that, right? If you get individual accolades, but it doesn't lift the team, I can recall hearing on the radio station I used to work at when Maurice Jones-Drew led the league in rushing, but the Jaguars didn't make the playoffs. So what does it mean to have a running back? I can hear people just a couple of years ago with Jalen Carter at defensive tackle and people saying, so what? He's a defensive tackle. Defensive tackles don't win championships. And I just think about Aaron Donald sacking Joe Burrow on a play where they would have got a touchdown if he didn't do it. And I think about Chris Jones. And then I think about the Eagles this year with all of their dudes, including, said Jalen Carter, making these contributions toward a championship. And I'm sitting here thinking like, people just say anything and don't know what they're talking about. So what we're going to do is try to figure out how do you identify the best player and the best fit and to see if that is the same thing. I saw something earlier where on the Peacock and Williamson podcast, that's a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where Peacock and Williamson basically talked in the first segment about teams that run a certain defense, like odd fronts and 3-4s, and defenses where they just put 7 guys in the box that are just great football players and the positions aren't as much defined as the responsibilities are. How they sit at the end of the draft and just wait for guys to fall to them. If you're a team that does not covet a nose tackle, somebody that runs those defenses and uses a nose tackle for 3 straight downs and doesn't worry about him being a pass rusher as much as they worried about that player keeping linebackers clean from guards, they're going to get Jamari Caldwell in around the 3rd round, and that dude's going to be a 12-year pro, and everybody's going to be talking about him like he's like Jamari Caldwell the Great. But there's other teams that don't value that 1 or that 0, that 1 technique or that 0 as much as a 3-down player. And all they're going to do is go, nah, we don't need him. So what do the Jaguars do at 5 when it comes to a player like Mason Graham? What do they do at 5 when it comes to someone like Ashton Genty? Here's what has to happen. I think they have to know who they want to be. Who do you want to be? Do you want a bell cow running back that is going to define your team and make him the focus of your team instead of the quarterback? Do you want a dude who's just going to take a little bit of pressure off of Trevor Lawrence? Do you want a guy that you think long-term is better than both Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby, or that could, at least for this year, be combined with them and then allow you to move on? Do you want a guy like Mason Graham that makes you change your defense a little bit just to get him on the field because you have Eric Armstead and you also have Mason Smith that you hope to gain something from? What do you do if you're the 3-headed monster of Cohen, Gladstone, and Boselli? We'll talk about it. We'll try to find out if all of those guys can be the same player. Can you be the best player and the best fit and the best for the future of this franchise? Let's get on it. Here, segment 2 of Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account and wonder, man, where did all my money go? Between dining out and online shopping and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. I'm telling you, man, there's surprising insights you can get, because when I started using Monarch, I realized just how much money I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget a little smarter and I save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for half off your first year. All right, we're going to get to these questions. The question is it the same player? Can the Jaguars positively identify the best player, the best fit for their team, and can that be one person? Let's get to Mason Graham first. There's a possibility that they could draft Mason Graham at number 5, and he beats out Mason Smith, and he allows them to use Eric Armstead as an older player who gets 20 snaps a game. The problem with that is they'll have to absorb and understand and bite the bullet on the fact that they're paying Eric Armstead a whole lot more money to be a whole lot more than that. The thing is though, the money won't matter if you're winning a whole bunch of games. Obviously, ideally, you want the people making the most money to also be the people making the biggest contributions. But they took this team over, and Eric Armstead was already who he was, making the money that who he is. Maybe there's a way that he could be more effective by being a bit of a role player, being a bit of a guy that you can mix and match, being a bit of a player who you can put on the field because you're doing so well on first down that he becomes more relevant on second and third and long. Perhaps that's the case. Perhaps there could be certain packages and certain times when you use them. There's never a situation where you can have too many players on the interior. Milton Williams was a big part of the Philadelphia Eagles last year, and he didn't even start for the most part. Sometimes he did. Eventually, when he got into the starting lineup as sort of a defensive end, because in their lineup, they put Jalen Carter at number 1, and they had like Josh Sweat at linebacker. So there was a way to get him on the field in early downs, and now he has this big old contract because of it. He's going to play for the Patriots. The thing is if you win a lot, nobody will care about the snaps. All they care about is the fact that guys have their day and their moments to step up. Jalen Carter's the best. Josh Sweat got money. Milton got money. Jomo got money to go back to Philadelphia. Brandon Graham got sent off the right way. They just had a whole bunch of guys just making plays for Philly, and they ended up winning a Super Bowl. But see, that's in hindsight. In foresight, you try to do the best thing that you can for the Jaguars. So this all comes down to what do they view Mason Graham as? And it got kind of confusing when he showed up at the combine at 296 pounds. I heard he was back up to like 309, 312 or something like that at the pro day at Michigan. But we thought he was a 320-pounder who could possibly be a sort of pass rush nose tackle, right? How much do we feel about him is because of the kid that was next to him, Kenneth Grant, who is a pure nose tackle. Why? And I'm not saying that Grant made Mason look good. He did, but that's his job. But Mason probably also made him look good a little bit, right? And I'm not saying Mason is only good if he's lined up next to Grant. What I'm saying is if Grant is the dude that you really, really need, ideally, you wish he was a better player than Mason Graham so you could take him at number 5. That is what they have to ask themselves. Is Mason Graham that much better, or is he actually better, in their opinion, not ours, than Walter Nolan? Because they're going to play the same position, right? Do you just make this pick because, well, we can't worry about Mason Smith too much. We're going to let him contribute, but he's going to be a contributor. But after next year, Eric Armstead might be gone. That's a consideration that you make. Now, let's switch it up to Genty. Genty makes you change your identity a little bit. If you're not going to give him the ball 25 times, I would not, and I mean touches, I would not draft him at number 5. I wouldn't even draft him in the top 15. One of the things about Bijan Robinson that confuses me, the first year I was like, what's wrong with Arthur Smith? Why isn't he using him more in Atlanta? They picked him at number 7. Now the second year, they still didn't use him as much as you thought they would, even though they changed coaches. They're using him as an airback. You could say Detroit is kind of doing the same thing with Jahmyr Gibbs, but they're not. Gibbs doesn't even start a lot of times. They start somebody else, right? But what happens is Gibbs usually touches the ball more than anybody else, and he usually delivers on those touches. Alvin Kamara, for a long time, did not start in New Orleans. They start Mark Ingram. But Alvin Kamara would be the guy who had the biggest impact on the game. Genty, on the other hand, is a little bit more of an explosive back, but he's the guy who has power, and he's the dude. What he is a very, very talented version of James Robinson. That's what he is. He's not Leonard Fournette. He's a very, very talented version of James Robinson. He reminds me of a little bit of a mixture. They call him Emmitt Smith with speed, but he's a little bit of a mixture of what you would see out of the running back in Indy and what you would see out of Saquon Barkley. He's kind of, I don't think he's as big or as good as Barkley, but he's kind of that dude. I said he's kind of like Derrick Henry, where if you have him and don't at least let him touch the ball 20 times, you can still be effective. But the problem with that is, why are you taking him at number 5 if that's what you're going to do? So it all kind of has to add up. And I think they want to be a team. And don't get me wrong, Genty can be good anywhere. But I think the Jaguars want to be a team to where they spread the ball around. But at the end of the day, the catalyst for everything they're going to do is their quarterback. Right? Yeah, I think the catalyst for what they want to do and the person that they want as the lead dog on front of that sled is Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. That's what they're going to do. I think they're going to be a passing team. I think they want to beat you with speed. And I think they want to run the football to make sure that they establish the fact that they will bust you in the mouth. Now, they could do that with Ashton Genty easily. But then you have to ask yourself, can't they do that with the 2 guys that they have right now? Or can they address that in round 2, round 3, round 4, and get a player that, while he's not as good as Genty, is someone that you can really, really win with when you combine him with the other 2 players? It's going to be interesting to me to see what Cleveland does at number 2, and it'll be interesting for me to see what the New England Patriots do at number 4. Now, I know people are saying, well, it's Shedeur or Abdul Howard, and whoever's left doesn't matter because Travis Hunter is going to go to the Giants at 3. And even if it's Travis Hunter, that Shedeur will go to the Giants at 3, even though they just signed 2 quarterbacks and they this, that, and the third. Or Abdul Carter won't go to the Giants, but he's sitting there. The Patriots got to take him. The worst thing that could happen is you go quarterback, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter in some shape or fashion, some shape, form, or fashion. And then the Jaguars are sitting there at 5. And if they do consider someone like Walter Nolan close enough to Mason Graham that they could move back a little bit, the problem that you may have is you got to hope that a team thinks that Mason Graham is good enough to trade up to the Jaguars for. So if the Jaguars want Mason Graham, they're in a good spot. If they don't want Mason Graham, or if they think moving back is the answer, if those 4 guys that I just mentioned, both quarterbacks and then Carter and Travis Hunter go, then they're sitting at number 5, and they're either going to be stuck with Mason Graham or they got to find a suitor that wants to come up and take somebody else. And I don't know a player at 5 without those 4 being on the board that anybody would consider moving up for. So what has to happen is this. In my opinion, the Jaguars have to know who they want to be, who they are, and zoom their eyes in on the possibility that if those 4 guys are gone, they have to know whether that's Mason Graham or not. I'll tell you why adding a guy with football character can never be a bad thing, but it can be viewed as a bad thing by the fans. And I'll tell you exactly why, and use the example that I gave at the top of the show, Trayvon Walker. We'll discuss that and more here on Locked On Jaguars. But first, I got to let you know about today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. March Madness is here. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before, and it is the Final Four. How about that rhyming? Never before, because it's the Final Four. And there's 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four, and everybody is ready for it. And right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who gets to cut down those nets next Monday night. Picking your favorites is easy. If you got your eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. I would say right now the biggest underdog is probably Houston. That's the way I'll go with it. Just visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all Final Four long. Make your picks on FanDuel and get you some of that Skrilla. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com. All right, third segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We have talked about identifying the best player and the best fit. I don't know who that is. I can't read nobody's mind, and I shouldn't. I will go back to this again, and I'll tell you, if we do know who it is, then the Jaguars brass, well, they're just doing something wrong unless we're just that smart and we're omniscient. None of us are that. Is it the same player? Is best fit and best player the same person? I'd say the closer you are to the top, that's easier to do, and 5 is a good spot to be in. But what will determine it? A lot will determine it. A lot will determine it, and it is this. They depend a lot on the coach's inputs. They can look at their roster and tell where they need the biggest input, or if the biggest need they have actually also lines up with the best player. I will tell you right now, if that's defensive tackle in the form of a 3 technique, I don't think so. That's just my opinion. I don't necessarily think that their biggest need is that. The biggest need I believe they have, I don't think they think that it's their biggest need. I think it's another offensive lineman. That's just my opinion. I also think they need another big play wide receiver to just put that room over the top. But the draft doesn't end at pick 5. And I've always said this, and I'll say it and repeat it again. Your biggest need or your biggest priority does not have to be the first thing that you address in either free agency or the draft. The reason why I say that is because it might not present itself that way. If you determine your biggest need is one position, but when you get up there and pick, the best player at that position is gone, and then the next 7 or 8 players that you have on your board don't match up with that biggest need, well, you can't force it unless you move back. But then you have to ask yourself or tell yourself this. There's a possibility that this great player that you don't currently need, but contractually you might need him in a year or 2, and he would actually help you right now, and he's actually better than the people you have at that position right now, but you think those people that at those positions are adequate and that you can get by with them, you still might take him anyway. You know why? Because he makes your team better, because he's better than those people. And what happens if you don't take him and he ends up with a division rival and you got to deal with him for the next decade? Sometimes people get mad at you for taking Trayvon Walker when you didn't take Aiden Hutchinson. And then sometimes people get mad at you not for taking Trayvon Walker, but because you didn't take Aiden Hutchinson. People will be angry at you when you don't take the guy they want you to take, and they'll be angry at you for taking the guy that they didn't want you to take. You can't worry about it. If you're the Jaguars, you got to figure it out and say, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to play them together. Even if it means we don't play with a 0 or 1 and we just 2-gap everybody. Well, I had a coach tell me just last year, if you get a defensive lineman that's going 2-gap, he's got to be special. If you're picking at number 5, he should be special. So what that means is you'll be playing first down, but you'll be lined up like it's 3rd and long. Can you do that and get away with that every play? Is that going to be good enough for you to keep those guys occupied and off of the offensive linemen occupied enough so they don't get up there and whitewash your linebackers and Ventrell Smith, all 230 pounds of him? Can you play that way? Can you play Devon Hamilton on first down? Can you play Jordan Jefferson on first down? What if you got Jamari Caldwell in the 3rd round? Would you play him a little bit more? Are you going to be dictating to the offense, or are you going to be hoping and wishing that you can get into the situations where the lineup that you put on the field is the most effective? Do you move back? Is there somebody willing to pay you what you need in order to move back so you can get more bites at the apple and actually get guys that fit positions? This is why I say you need to know who you are, because when you know who you are as a player, or as a team, you know exactly the type of players you want to bring into your organization. I'm really, really excited to watch and see exactly what the Jacksonville Jaguars do, because just like I told you in free agency, it is going to make a determination. It is going to tell us what they have been thinking this whole time. However, the first 4 picks falls, if you see the Jaguars are out on the clock and then all of a sudden the Jaguar emblem goes away and then something else pops up and they go, we have a trade, it's going to tell you, it's going to answer all of the questions that you had since free agency started, since the offseason started, since in the middle of the season last year when people were telling me Mason Graham, dude in DC kept saying Mason Graham, Mason Graham, Mason Graham. The reason why I do this is because the possibilities are endless. And the reason why I do it without saying I know exactly what they're going to do is because I am repeatedly telling folks that if I knew what they were going to do, I'd be in the building and I wouldn't be sitting here doing a podcast. It's all going to be fun. It's all going to be great to watch. I hope I covered the Ashton Genty situation. I hope I also covered Mason Graham enough. The Jaguars might actually draft somebody I haven't even mentioned. So tomorrow's show, I'm going to talk about the dudes that I haven't mentioned that should be mentioned for the Jaguars to check out. Before I do that, you guys make sure you check out Locked On NFL Draft, because that's going to take you where you need to go in terms of knowing all of the places the players will be in terms of tiers, who's here, who's there, what the other teams around the NFL need. And that way you can do a mock draft. I suggest that you learn that stuff, look at the team needs, look at the players and the player rankings, and find the best engine you can in terms of mock drafts, and try to beat every single team and do it yourself. That's going to also let you know who are the possible players that could fall to the Jaguars in round 2, or if they need to move up to the back of round 1 and take another shot at a first-round player. All right, man, you guys make sure you check out Locked On NFL Draft and tune in tomorrow here on Locked On Jaguars. Until then, y'all take care and thanks for joining.